Hey, in this episode of Black Wealthy and Wise, today I'm going to be talking about student loans. Hey, welcome to Black Wealthy and Wise, the number one podcast for helping Black families escape financial slavery and create financial freedom so they can live their best life and leave a legacy for their family. My name is Alex Jones. I'm your host. And guys, today I want to talk about the student loan crisis or situation and just kind of get your thoughts about it. So let me know. Let me hear your comments below. If this is your first time joining me, I'm always sharing information to help you create more financial freedom in your life, so you can truly live the life that you want. So if you like that type of information, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. So, um, guys, let me know what you think. Do you think student loans should be forgiven? So, if you remember back on the campaign trail, back before President Biden became President Biden, he actually talked about on the campaign trail forgiving $10,000, if you remember, $10,000 of student loan debt. Well, we are now into 2022 and nothing has happened or moved on that front. So today we just want to talk about it a little bit. So, uh, do you have student loans? Do you still have student loans, or did you have them in the past? And what are your thoughts? Do you think student loans should be forgiven, or did you have a student loan before, paid yours off, and you think maybe other people should not have their student loans forgiven? So let me know what your thoughts are. So let me just give you a little bit of a little background about student loans. Student loans were actually first introduced way back in 1840 at Harvard, believe it or not, at Harvard back in 1840. And throughout the years, I would say around 1944 with the GI Bill, there became an opportunity for veterans and people who had gone off to war, who had come back home, for them to be able to get an education. So the GI Bill was really started way back in 1944. And then, roughly about 1955 or so, student loans became a little bit more widespread for people to be able to afford to go to college. So currently, there's about 1.7 trillion with a T, outstanding debt as it relates to student loans. That roughly equates to about, on average, about $28,900 per borrower. Okay, so you might know that over the years there have been several programs that have been introduced over the years that would allow you to be able to have your student loans forgiven if you go into public service, right? So the public service student loan forgiveness program was introduced. And before President Biden actually came into office, 98%, 98 now, 98% of all the people who applied, who spent years in public service, people who had paid, I guess part of the program was to make payments for 10 years or so. They had done everything they were supposed to do in order to get their student loans forgiven. Um, and only about 2% of the people who applied were approved, right? So 98% of people would not be approved. So part of this student loan forgiveness, especially during this time of year or during this economic climate. We know right now inflation is through the roof. Inflation has never been higher in the last 40 years. And so, what might this what impact might this have? For instance, many of the reasons why people are not able to purchase or buy homes is because they have too much student loan debt. And so, if that debt is actually forgiven for some people, that means that they can now enter the housing market. What does that potentially mean? Then that potentially means that you can have just that many more people who are trying to purchase and buy homes. And with the housing market already the way that it is, that could be a problem for housing continuing to be somewhat affordable, right? So there's a lot of things to consider. So President Biden said he may forgive up to he may forgive $10,000. That was the campaign promise that he actually made. And quite honestly, I believe that if he wants to have half a chance of being able to be reelected, then I believe that he has to make good on this campaign promise. It just, there's no if, ands, or buts about it. Doesn't mean that he's going to necessarily be reelected, but if you want to have half a chance, you need to keep that campaign promise. So, people in Congress and the Senate would actually like to see that figure, that $10,000 figure. They want to see it to be a little bit higher. So they're looking at somewhere in the $50,000 range. So I don't know what the sweet spot is. Obviously, I'm not someone who's in government. I do wonder, given the fact that the government is already way in debt, right? And given the fact that inflation is already at a 40-year all-time high, I wonder if this is something that really should be done. Now, believe it or not, I still actually have my student loans, believe it or not, and my wife does as well. And I've been out of school a long time, right? So if $10,000 is forgiven, that means about 15 million people would have their debt wiped out. So that's about 32% of those people with student loans would no longer have student loans. Uh, at the $50,000 threshold, 30 million people would have their debt, or 76% of people would actually be student loan or student debt free at that point. So it's definitely something to consider. Now, what's also interesting is we know that the default rates for student loans prior to the pandemic happening was already at about 11%. Okay, 11%. And the average student loan is $300 a month. That is the average. So, $300 can certainly impact someone's ability to purchase a home, or in some cases, especially if you worked in the public sector, right? Many times, jobs with the public sector, those jobs didn't necessarily pay a whole lot because they were in the public sector. So, if you have a $300 a month payment that you had to make all those years for 10 years or so, right? Um, and to go through the process and to suddenly not have your your debt forgiven, I think is certainly unfair. And I believe that the previous administration They tried everything they possibly could. I think Betsy Davos was the person over the education or the education secretary, and she tried everything under her administration, everything she possibly could to keep people from being able to have their student loan debt forgiven. And I think that is so unfair and is not right, especially when they have followed all of the guidelines, when they have followed all of the rules, and then to not have the application approved, I think is not the fair thing. So I would love to hear from you. Do you think that people who had to take out student loan debt should it be forgiven? Uh, I when the president made that statement on the campaign trail, let me tell you, my ears definitely perked up. And I can say that if he does forgive $10,000, then my student loans will actually be wiped clean. So I would be one of the 15 million people who would be student loan debt free at that point. So it is something very interesting to take a look at. It is something I believe that can certainly have long-term effects positively. I believe by having, by many people having that, by 15 million people having their student loan debt forgiven, that means that just that many more people can have some relief now, can actually live their life a little bit better. Because many times when people entered university and college, there was no other opportunity for them to pay for it unless there were student loans involved. I don't know if you remember at some point in the process, probably about somewhere in the 80s or 90s, that less money was actually made available for grants and Pell grants and things like and the like, which necessitated people having to get more and larger loans just to be able to go to college. And then it became even more difficult when the job markets get really really tight and people are not hiring. I've known people in the past who had advanced degrees and postgraduate degrees and was not able to find a job in their field. So it's certainly something to consider. It is a very interesting thing to look at. President Biden said that he should be making some announcement here in the next few weeks. And the last time I think he spoke on it was back in April 28th or so. And so we should probably be hearing something very soon. I'm almost certain that he is definitely cognizant of the fact that we have a midterm election coming up in November, right? So I'm quite sure that there is some thought to timing it just right. So hopefully there can be some kind of lift for the Democrat Party in order for them to be able to do a little bit better when it comes to the midterm elections in November. The moratorium on student loans is scheduled to actually be lifted at the end of August. So we know some announcement will certainly be made before then. And so it's going to be interesting. I'd love to hear from you. I love to hear your thoughts. Did you go to college and did you have to take out student loans or did you not have to take out student loans? If you did not have to take out student loans, do you think it's fair that people should have their student loans forgiven? Or if you had student loan in the past and paid yours off, do you think other people who haven't paid theirs off, should they have theirs forgiven? Let me know your thoughts, all right? So, as always, We'll see you next episode. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.